The desert wind carried secrets across the Martian plains, secrets that would shatter everything humanity believed about time, space, and destiny itself. Some truths are buried not because they're dangerous, but because the world isn't ready to face them. This is one of those truths. Jackson Reeves stood in the sterile white corridor of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, his coffee growing cold in his hands. At 39, he'd spent 15 years building rockets, calculating trajectories, and dreaming of the stars. His ex-wife used to joke that he loved Mars more than he loved her. She wasn't entirely wrong. Now, staring at the grainy photograph pinned to the classified briefing board, he wondered if Mars had been calling to him all along. The image showed something impossible. A metallic structure jutting from red sand, its angles too precise to be natural, its surface scarred by fire and time. The Viking lander had captured it 7 days ago. 7 days of silence from NASA headquarters. 7 days of encrypted messages and midnight phone calls. 7 days of pretending the world hadn't just changed forever. Beside him, Dr. Catherine Wells adjusted her glasses, her hands trembling slightly. The astrophysicist had flown in from MIT 3 hours ago, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Her reputation for solving impossible problems had earned her a place on this team. But looking at her now, Jackson saw only fear reflected in those sharp green eyes. "It's artificial," she whispered, though they were alone in the corridor. "Every analysis confirms it. That's not Martian geology. That's engineering." Thomas Garrett entered the room with the confidence of a man who'd spent 20 years in military intelligence. Broad-shouldered and gray at the temples, he carried a steel briefcase that required 3 separate keys to open. His security clearance exceeded everyone else's in the building combined. When he spoke, people listened. "The briefing starts in 5 minutes," Thomas said, his voice carrying the weight of bad news. "Director Morrison wants everyone in the vault. No recording devices. No notes. What you're about to see stays in that room." The vault sat 3 levels below ground, behind doors thick enough to survive a nuclear blast. Inside, the air tasted recycled and old. 6 leather chairs surrounded a mahogany table that looked transported from a 1950s war room. Jackson took his seat between Catherine and Dr. Raymond Cole, a propulsion specialist whose nervous energy filled the small space. Raymond drummed his fingers against the table, a habit that annoyed everyone who worked with him. At 52, he designed the engines for half of NASA's deep space probes. His mind worked faster than most people could follow, jumping between concepts like a stone skipping across water. Today, that restless intelligence seemed focused on a single terrifying question. "How long?" Raymond asked before Director Morrison even entered. "How long has it been there?" Morrison appeared as if summoned by the question. Director Elizabeth Morrison had led NASA's Classified Projects Division for 8 years. She'd seen things that would make conspiracy theorists weep with validation. But today, even her practiced composure showed cracks. She set a stack of photographs on the table with hands that weren't quite steady. "Before we begin," she said, "I need your oath. Everything discussed here is classified beyond top secret. The President himself has signed off on this operation. If you cannot commit to absolute secrecy, leave now." No one moved. Morrison activated the overhead projector. The first image showed the Viking lander's initial photograph, that geometric shadow on the horizon. The second image zoomed closer, revealing details that made Jackson's engineering background rebel against reality. Hull plating, thermal shielding, what looked like attitude control thrusters. Preliminary dating suggests the structure has been on Mars for approximately 600 years, Morrison continued. But here's where it gets interesting. She clicked to the next slide, showing close-up photographs of markings on the hull. English letters, faded but readable. USSN Pathfinder. Mars Survey Expedition 7. Commission 2547. The room temperature seemed to drop. Catherine leaned forward, her scientific mind already racing through possibilities. That's impossible. The date hasn't happened yet. Precisely, Morrison replied. We're looking at a spacecraft from Earth's future, crashed on Mars in Earth's past. Raymond stopped drumming his fingers. Show us the interior. The next series of photographs revealed corridors corroded by time, but unmistakably human. Control panels with English labels. Sleeping quarters designed for human proportions. A galley kitchen with equipment that wouldn't look out of place in any naval vessel. And everywhere, dust thick enough to bury the truth. Thomas opened his briefcase and removed a leather-bound book sealed in protective plastic. Viking's secondary probe found this in what appears to be the captain's quarters. We've authenticated the paper, the ink, even the binding materials. Everything tests as approximately 600 years old. He opened the book carefully, revealing pages filled with handwriting. The entries spoke of Mars colonization efforts, of supply ships arriving from Earth, of terraforming projects that turned the red planet green. But the final pages told a different story. June 15th, 2549, Thomas read aloud. Temporal anomaly detected in Sector 7. Energy readings are off every chart we have. Dr. Sheffield believes we've stumbled onto some kind of naturally occurring wormhole. Command has ordered us to investigate. I have a bad feeling about this. He turned the page. June 17th, 2549. The anomaly is growing. It's pulled in 3 survey drones already. We're trying to establish a safe perimeter, but the gravitational effects are unlike anything in our database. Sheffield thinks it might be a bridge through time rather than space. If he's right, we need to warn Earth immediately. Another page. June 20th, 2549. God help us. The anomaly destabilized during our research mission. The ship was caught in its field. Systems are failing. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 9. We're being pulled backward through time. I can see Earth through the viewport, but it's wrong. The continents are different. The lights of civilization are gone. We've traveled too far. The final entry was dated June 21st, 2549. This is Captain Daniel Foster's last log entry. We've crashed on Mars, but it's not the Mars we left. It's primitive, untouched by human hands. My crew is dying. Our technology is too advanced for this era. If anyone finds this, know that we tried to warn them. There's a flaw in the quantum resonance pattern of temporal wormholes. Attempting to study them creates a feedback loop that destabilizes the entire structure. Tell future expeditions to leave the anomalies alone. Some doors are closed for a reason. Silence filled the vault like water flooding a submarine. Jackson found himself staring at a crew photograph tucked between the pages. 15 people in pressure suits, smiling at the camera. People who wouldn't be born for 5 centuries. People who died 600 years ago. There's more, Morrison said quietly. She pulled out another document, this one more recent. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring array picked up a signal from Mars. It's been broadcasting on a loop since the Viking landing. The message is simple. Don't come looking for us. Don't try to save us. Every attempt to change the timeline makes it worse. Let us rest. The transmission signature matches the Pathfinder's communication system. Catherine's scientific skepticism finally cracked. You're saying we're receiving messages from a dead crew, warning us not to investigate the crash that killed them 600 years before they were born. That's exactly what I'm saying, Morrison replied. And here's the truly terrifying part. According to the captain's log, the temporal anomaly that pulled them backward through time was created by us. By this investigation, by our attempts to understand what happened. We haven't just found a crashed spacecraft from the future. We found evidence that our actions in 1976 will cause a disaster in 2549. Raymond stood abruptly, pacing the small room. That's a classic causality loop. Effect becomes cause, becomes effect. But if we stop investigating, we never learn about the danger. The future expedition stumbles into the anomaly blind. But if we continue investigating, we create the very conditions that cause the anomaly in the first place. Thomas nodded grimly. The Pentagon has war-gamed every scenario. There's no good outcome. Either we proceed and potentially cause the deaths of 15 people who won't be born for centuries, or we bury this discovery and potentially allow an even worse disaster to unfold. Jackson finally spoke, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. What about a third option? What if we use the information in that logbook to prevent the accident? Change the timeline entirely? Morrison's expression suggested she'd been waiting for someone to ask that question. Then we enter completely unknown territory. Theoretical physicists have argued about temporal paradoxes for decades, but this would be the first real-world test. We could save those 15 lives. We could also unravel causality itself and erase human civilization from existence. The weight of impossible choices settled over the room like Martian dust. Outside the vault, the world continued its normal rhythm. People worked, loved, dreamed of the future. They had no idea that the future was already here, buried in red sand, waiting to be discovered. Waiting to destroy everything? Catherine broke the silence. We need more information. The logbook can't be the only record they left behind. If the crew knew they were dying, they would have tried to preserve their knowledge. Technical specifications, scientific discoveries, warnings about other dangers. We need to send another mission. Already in motion, Morrison replied. Viking 2 launches in 6 weeks, but there's a complication. According to the time-stamped entries in the logbook, the temporal anomaly that destroyed the Pathfinder doesn't appear on Mars until 2547, 2 years before the accident. Someone or something places it there deliberately. Sabotage? Thomas asked. Or destiny? Raymond countered. What if the anomaly has to exist? What if the universe itself is ensuring that this loop closes properly? We might be fighting against the fundamental structure of space-time. Jackson studied the photograph of the dead crew again. One face caught his attention. A woman in her 30s with determined eyes and a smile that suggested she loved her job. According to the personnel file attached to the photo, her name was Dr. Rebecca Foster, theoretical physicist, specialist in quantum mechanics and temporal dynamics. The captain's daughter. She knew, Jackson said suddenly. Look at this entry from 3 months before the accident. Dad keeps worrying about my research into temporal mechanics. He thinks I'm chasing ghosts. Maybe I am, but I can't shake the feeling that time isn't as linear as we believe. That past, present, and future are all happening simultaneously. That somewhere, someone is watching us from another point in the timeline, trying to warn us about something we can't see yet. Morrison leaned over to read the entry. She predicted her own death, or she experienced a temporal echo from her future self. Either way, she knew something was wrong. Then maybe she left us a way out, Catherine said. If she understood temporal mechanics better than anyone in her era, she might have hidden instructions in the ship's systems. A way to break the loop without destroying the timeline. Raymond stopped pacing. We'd need to access the Pathfinder's computer core. Assuming it survived the crash and 6 centuries of Martian weather, Viking 2 will have the equipment to interface with future technology, Thomas confirmed. But we're working blind. We don't know what kind of security systems a spacecraft from 2547 might have. We don't know if accessing those systems will trigger the very anomaly we're trying to prevent. We don't have a choice, Jackson said firmly. 15 people died alone on Mars, 600 years before they were born, trying to warn us about a danger we haven't created yet. We owe it to them to try. Morrison nodded slowly. Then we proceed. But understand this. If we fail, if we trigger the anomaly and cause the Pathfinder to crash, we'll have murdered 15 innocent people. Their blood will be on our hands, even though they won't be born for centuries. The briefing ended. But the nightmare was just beginning. 3 months after the crash, Viking 2 stood ready on the launch pad at Cape Canaveral. Its payload bay wasn't filled with standard mission equipment. No, it was packed with technology that simply shouldn't exist in 1976. For 12 long weeks, NASA's most brilliant engineers had been working feverishly, reverse engineering fragments from the Pathfinder's external hull. They couldn't fully comprehend the 500-year-old tech, but they learned just enough. Enough to build interfaces that might, just might, be able to talk to it. I stood in the control room, a knot in my stomach, watching the final checks. My job as a propulsion engineer was a distant memory. Now I was the coordinator, the guy trying to connect teams studying impossible artifacts, all to prevent a disaster that wouldn't even happen for another 5 centuries. It was a role I never asked for, but one I couldn't walk away from. Meanwhile, Catherine had practically moved into the jet propulsion laboratory. She was fueled by coffee and a desperate need for answers, sleeping maybe 3 hours a night. The dark circles under her eyes were a testament to a mind pushed to its absolute breaking point. But her obsession was yielding results, discoveries that kept our impossible mission moving forward. One afternoon, she burst into the control room, her hands full of printouts. "I found something," she announced, her voice trembling with exhaustion and excitement. Rebecca Foster, the captain's daughter. She published a paper 2 weeks before the accident. It was all theoretical stuff, mathematical models of closed time-like curves, but she hid something inside it. A message. She spread the papers across a console, and we all gathered around. "Look at this," she urged, pointing at the equations. "The variable names? If you read them in sequence, they spell out words. Warning, investigation, creates, paradox." Jackson, she knew. She knew someone from the past would find her work. She was trying to warn us, using the pure language of mathematics to communicate across time. Raymond, our best theorist, leaned in, his eyes scanning the complex formulas. "This is brilliant," he murmured. "She's describing how observing quantum systems can cause a ripple effect backward through time when temporal displacement is involved. Every scan we run, every piece of data we collect, it's sending waves into the future. Those ripples are what's creating the conditions for the anomaly in the first place." The chilling reality of our situation settled over me. "So how do we stop it?" I asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. "We can't investigate without observing, and we can't observe without creating the very paradox we're trying to prevent." Catherine looked up from the papers, her expression unreadable. "We don't stop it," she said quietly. "We guide it." She pointed to another section of the paper. "She's proposing a controlled paradox. Instead of trying to stop the accident, we engineer it. We make sure the Pathfinder crashes, but in a way that preserves the main timeline while minimizing the loss of life." Just then, Thomas, our military liaison, entered the room. His face was grim. "I've just come from a meeting with the Joint Chiefs," he said, his voice low. "They want to weaponize this. If we can control time, we can rewrite history. Win wars before they even start. Eliminate threats before they ever emerge." "Absolutely not," I said, my voice sharp. "We've seen what happens when people mess with time. 15 people died. We are not adding to that number." "The decision might not be ours, Jackson," Thomas replied. "The Pentagon sees this as a world-changing opportunity, not a tragedy. They're already planning a classified program to study temporal warfare." Before I could argue, Morrison's voice crackled over the intercom from launch control. "Launch countdown is proceeding. Viking 2 will reach Mars in 7 months. Whatever we're going to do, we need to decide now." My gaze fell on the equations scattered across the console, Rebecca Foster's desperate message from the future. Then I looked at the photograph of the Pathfinder crew, those 15 souls who died alone on that cold, distant world. "We finish what they started," I said, my decision made. "We break the loop, save who we can, And then we bury this technology so deep that no one in our lifetime can ever abuse it. Catherine nodded, a flicker of hope in her tired eyes. Then we need to modify Viking 2's mission. We're not just studying the crash site. We're planting something there. Something that will guide the Pathfinder's trajectory when the anomaly pulls them back. A beacon? Raymond asked. More like a map, Catherine corrected. Rebecca's equations suggest the displacement isn't random. It follows quantum probability paths. If we can seed Mars with specific quantum signatures, we can influence where and when the Pathfinder appears. Guide them to a crash site with much better odds of survival. Thomas looked skeptical. You want to save them by making sure they crash somewhere else? I want to save them by giving them a chance, Catherine shot back. The current crash site is in one of the most hostile regions on Mars. Extreme temperatures, high radiation, no water ice for 100 kilometers. They froze to death within days. But there's a location in the northern plains with subsurface ice and more moderate conditions. If we can guide them there, some of them might survive long enough to build a shelter. The implications were staggering. That changes the timeline, I thought aloud. If crew members survive, they could have families. Their descendants could still be alive when future expeditions arrive. We'd be introducing human DNA from 2547 into an earlier era. I know, Catherine said softly, but the alternative is standing by and letting 15 people die when we have the power to help them. Morrison's voice came over the intercom again, more urgent this time. Launch in 10 minutes. I need final mission parameters now. The control room fell silent. This was the moment of truth. We either commit to changing history, or we let it unfold as it was meant to. I thought of Captain Foster's final, desperate warning, but I also thought of his daughter's hidden message. She didn't want us to give up. She wanted us to be clever. Modify the mission, I commanded. Plant the quantum beacons. Guide them to the northern plains. And include a message in the beacon's data stream. Tell them we tried. Tell them they weren't forgotten. Raymond's fingers flew across the keyboard, entering the new parameters. Catherine furiously calculated the quantum signature patterns. Thomas watched it all with a soldier's precision, ensuring every bit of data stayed locked within our classified channels. The countdown reached 0. With a thundering roar, Viking 2 launched into the clear Florida sky, carrying with it a desperate, impossible hope that we could rewrite a tragedy 5 centuries in the making. 7 months passed in a blur of anticipation and anxiety. Then, the probe touched down on Mars. It began transmitting, and we watched the first images fill the screens in the control room. The landing site looked peaceful, almost serene. Just red sand stretching to a butterscotch horizon. There was no sign of the Pathfinder wreckage, of course. That was still 500 years in the future. Beacon deployment successful, a technician reported. Quantum signature generators are active and stable. Catherine reviewed the telemetry, a small, satisfied smile on her face. The math works. When the temporal anomaly forms, it'll be drawn to these patterns. The Pathfinder will emerge from the wormhole right here, instead of at the original site. Now we wait, Thomas said. 500 years for the loop to close. But we didn't have to wait that long. Suddenly, the monitors flickered. Interference patterns we couldn't explain filled the screens. Then, the impossible happened. A new message appeared, transmitted through Viking 2's 1976-era communication system. This is Captain Daniel Foster, aboard the USSN Pathfinder. If you're receiving this, your plan worked. We came through the anomaly in a different location. Better shelter, better resources. We've lost 8 crew members, but 7 of us are alive. We're going to make it. Thank you. Whoever you are, thank you for not giving up on us. The control room erupted. Cheers and shouts of disbelief filled the air as technicians scrambled to understand how we were getting a transmission from the year 2549. But I knew. We had done it. We had changed the timeline. We had saved 7 lives. Our celebration was cut short as a second message came through, this one text only. There's something you need to know. We're not alone on Mars. The anomaly didn't just pull us backward through time. It opened a door. Something came through with us. Something that doesn't belong in any timeline. Whatever you do, don't send anyone else to investigate this crash site. The danger is greater than you realize. Foster out. A chilling silence fell over the room. Catherine stared at the screen, her look of triumph replaced by pure dread. "What did we do?" she whispered. Morrison's voice crackled over the intercom, heavy with a terrible realization. "We didn't just change the past. We let something into our present." The creature emerged from the Martian night like a nightmare given form. Viking 2's cameras caught only glimpses before going dark. Shapes that defied geometry. Movement that ignored the laws of physics. Whatever Captain Foster's crew had accidentally brought through the temporal anomaly, it wasn't from Earth's timeline. Jackson watched the final transmission from Viking 2 with growing horror. The probe's instruments had registered temperature fluctuations impossible in Mars's thin atmosphere. Magnetic fields that spiraled in patterns no natural process could create. And that shape, moving across the sand with terrible purpose. "We need to shut this down," Thomas said, his military training screaming at him to contain the threat. "Shut down the quantum beacons." Close the doorway we opened. "It's too late," Catherine replied, her voice hollow. "The beacons are just markers. The actual bridge through time is being held open by the anomaly itself, by the Pathfinder's presence in the wrong era. Shutting down our equipment won't change anything." Raymond was running calculations at superhuman speed, his fingers flying across a computer keyboard. "The entity came through because we changed the timeline. In the original version, the Pathfinder crashed in an unstable region and everyone died quickly. No survivors. No sustained temporal bridge. But by saving 7 crew members, we extended the anomaly's duration. Gave something time to find the opening and slip through. Then we're responsible," Jackson said quietly. "We saved 7 people and potentially doomed our entire timeline." Morrison had been on the phone with Pentagon officials for the past hour. She hung up and turned to face the team, her expression grave. "The Joint Chiefs are ordering a military response. They want to nuke the Pathfinder crash site. Vaporize everything within a 10-kilometer radius. Eliminate the anomaly and whatever came through it. That would kill the surviving crew members," Catherine protested. "We just saved them. We can't murder them to clean up our mistake." "We might not have a choice," Morrison replied. "Early warning systems are detecting unusual activity across the solar system. Satellite interference that matches the Pathfinder's anomaly signature. Whatever that entity is, it's not staying on Mars. It's spreading." Thomas opened his briefcase and pulled out classified documents marked with red stamps. "There's another option. Risky as hell, but possible. We send a manned mission to Mars, not to study the anomaly, but to close it properly from the inside." "That's suicide," Raymond said bluntly. "We don't have the technology for a manned Mars mission. The fastest we could develop the capability is 15 years, maybe 20. By then, who knows what that entity will have done?" "Not necessarily," Thomas continued. "Remember, we've been reverse engineering Pathfinder technology for months. The hull plating alone represents advances in material science, decades ahead of our current capabilities. The propulsion systems used principles we're only beginning to understand. But we have the pieces. We have the blueprints in Rebecca Foster's research. We might be able to build a ship capable of reaching Mars in months instead of years." Jackson felt something shift in his understanding of the situation. "You're talking about Project Looking Glass, a classified program Morrison mentioned. You've been building a temporal ship." Morrison nodded slowly. "For the past 3 months, ever since we first accessed the Pathfinder's technical databases. It's not complete. Hell, it's barely functional. But with the right crew and enough desperate courage, it might get someone to Mars before the anomaly destabilizes completely. Define destabilize, Catherine said. According to our theoretical models, Raymond replied. Temporal anomalies of this magnitude don't collapse quietly. They tear holes in the fabric of space-time. Those holes spread like cracks in glass until the entire structure shatters. If the Pathfinder anomaly reaches critical mass, it could fracture causality itself. Past, present, and future would bleed together. Time as a linear concept would cease to exist. The implications were staggering. Not just the end of human civilization, but the end of coherent reality. Jackson thought about his daughter, safe in California with her mother. She was 5 years old. In a world where time broke down, she might never have been born. Or might never stop being born, trapped in an infinite loop of existence and non-existence. I'll go, he said before fear could override determination. I designed the propulsion systems. I understand the Pathfinder's technology better than anyone else on the team. If someone has to fly into that anomaly and close it from the inside, it should be me. Catherine stood beside him. I'm going too. We'll need someone who understands the quantum mechanics. Someone who can interface with Rebecca Foster's research and figure out how to seal the temporal bridge. This isn't a request for volunteers, Morrison said firmly. This is a one-way mission. The ship we've built might reach Mars, but we haven't solved the return journey problem. You'd be stranded on a hostile planet with no hope of rescue. Like the Pathfinder crew, Jackson replied. 7 people are alive on Mars because we didn't give up on them. The least we can do is not abandon them to die alongside them. Thomas closed his briefcase with a sound like a coffin lid. The Pentagon is giving us 72 hours. If we can't launch a mission by then, they're proceeding with nuclear sterilization. No appeals. No alternatives. The next 3 days blurred together in a fever dream of preparation. The ship they'd built looked like something from a science fiction movie. Sleek lines that suggested speed. Hull plating that shimmered with quantum uncertainty. Engines that bent space around themselves rather than pushing against it. They'd named it the Chronos, a fitting title for humanity's first temporal spacecraft. Jackson spent his final night on Earth writing letters he knew might never be delivered. One to his daughter, trying to explain why Daddy had to leave. One to his ex-wife, apologizing for all the ways he'd failed their marriage. And one to his younger self, warning him not to wish too hard for the stars. Sometimes they wish back. Catherine worked until the final moment, loading Rebecca Foster's equations into the Chronos computer systems. There's a pattern here, she said during their last briefing. Rebecca wasn't just warning us about the anomaly. She was giving us instructions for closing it. A specific sequence of quantum manipulations that should collapse the temporal bridge without destroying the timeline. Should? Raymond asked. Theoretical physics isn't an exact science when you're working with phenomena that won't be properly understood for 5 centuries, Catherine replied. But it's the best chance we have. Launch day arrived with cloudless skies and terrible clarity. The Chronos sat on its pad at a classified facility in Nevada, far from public eyes. No cameras. No reporters. No one to record humanity's desperate gamble against destiny itself. Jackson and Catherine, suited up in pressure gear that incorporated Pathfinder technology. The suits looked wrong, too advanced for 1976, like props from a movie about the future. Which, in a way, they were. Morrison gave the final briefing with a voice that barely concealed her emotion. 73 minutes to Mars at maximum velocity. The Chronos will deposit you near the Pathfinder crash site, then use its remaining fuel to establish a stable orbit. If you succeed in closing the anomaly, The ship might be recoverable for a future rescue mission. If you fail, well, at least you'll die knowing you tried. Inspiring speech, Jackson said dryly. I'm not good at inspirational, Morrison admitted. But I'll say this. What you're attempting is impossible. The mathematics don't work. The engineering is untested. The whole mission violates every principle of proper planning and safety protocols. And yet, I believe you'll succeed. Because you have something the Pathfinder crew didn't. You have their sacrifice to guide you. You have Rebecca Foster's brilliant mind reaching across centuries to help you. And you have each other. The launch was unlike anything Jackson had experienced. No thunderous roar of chemical rockets. No crushing acceleration. Just a moment of disorientation as the Chronos slipped sideways through space, taking a shortcut through the underlying quantum foam of reality. Stars streaked past the viewport in colors that shouldn't exist, and then they were there. Mars hung before them, red and beautiful and deadly. The Chronos descended through the thin atmosphere on fields of controlled gravity, touching down 3 kilometers from the Pathfinder wreckage. And there, shimmering in the Martian twilight, was the anomaly dot. It looked like a wound in space, a tear in the fabric of reality through which impossible light spilled. Jackson could see through it, glimpsing other times, other places. Earth as it was 1 billion years ago. Mars as it would be in the distant future, green with terraformed life. And somewhere in that chaos of temporal fragments, the entity that had slipped through, waiting. Time to finish what they started, Catherine said, gathering her equipment. They suited up and stepped out onto Martian soil, carrying the weight of 2 timelines on their shoulders. The anomaly pulsed with rhythms that hurt to perceive directly, like trying to see 4-dimensional objects with 3-dimensional eyes. But Jackson forced himself to look, to understand what they were dealing with. The Pathfinder sat half buried in red sand, its hull scarred but intact. A makeshift shelter had been constructed nearby using debris from the crash. Lights glowed inside, evidence of human survival against impossible odds. 7 souls clinging to life in the wrong era, hoping someone would answer their distress call across the centuries. This is Jackson Reeves and Dr. Catherine Wells, Jackson said into his suit radio, broadcasting on all frequencies. We're from Earth, 1976. Captain Foster, if you can hear this, we're here to help. The response came immediately, a woman's voice crackling through the static. Not Captain Foster, but someone else. Someone younger. This is Dr. Rebecca Foster. I've been waiting for you. I knew you'd come. The equations predicted it. Rebecca, Catherine breathed. Your research saved us, guided us here. I know, Rebecca replied. I've been living in this time loop for 2 years now, experiencing the crash over and over, each iteration slightly different. I've watched you arrive 17 times, failed 17 times. This is the 18th attempt. Please tell me you figured out how to close the anomaly properly. Jackson felt reality shift beneath his feet. They weren't just trying to close a temporal bridge. They were caught in a loop, repeating the same failure across multiple timelines. But this time, they had something different. They had Rebecca Foster herself, alive and able to help directly instead of through centuries-old research papers. We need to work together, Catherine said. Combine our knowledge. Break the pattern that keeps trapping us in failure. Then we need to hurry, Rebecca replied. The entity is adapting, learning from each iteration. This time, it's stronger than before. And it knows we're here. The anomaly pulsed with malevolent awareness. Jackson felt something watching them through that tear in reality. Something vast and hungry, and utterly alien to human understanding. They'd opened a door that should have stayed closed forever, and now they had to close it before everything they loved was consumed. This was the moment. failure or triumph, death or salvation. And somewhere in the mathematics of causality, an equation waited to be solved. The entity moved across the Martian landscape like oil spreading on water, its form constantly shifting between states of matter that shouldn't coexist. Jackson watched through his helmet visor as it approached, feeling his mind rebel against the sight. This was what lived in the spaces between timelines, what fed on the gaps in causality. By changing history, they'd given it a doorway into structured reality. Rebecca Foster emerged from the Pathfinder shelter, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd survived 2 years in conditions designed to kill. At 34, she looked older than her personnel photo suggested, lines of exhaustion carved deep around her eyes. But those eyes burned with fierce intelligence, undimmed by hardship. "The entity isn't hostile," she said, her voice carrying over the radio with eerie calm. "Not in the way we understand hostility. It's trying to stabilize itself. Every timeline we create by changing the past generates new quantum possibilities. The entity exists in those possibilities. We're feeding it by trying to fix our mistakes." Catherine studied the readings on her portable analyzer. "Then closing the anomaly won't stop it. We need to collapse the entire probability wave. Reduce all the alternate timelines back to a single coherent history." "Which means choosing," Rebecca replied. "One timeline lives. All others cease to exist, including the versions where 7 of my crew members survived." The weight of that statement hung in the thin Martian atmosphere. They'd saved 7 lives by changing history. Now they had to decide if those 7 lives were worth the risk of reality itself. Unraveling, Jackson thought about probability and sacrifice, about the trolley problem philosophers loved to debate. Kill 7 to save billions. The mathematics were simple. The morality was impossible. "There has to be another way," he said, refusing to accept the choice. "Rebecca, your research described controlled paradoxes, ways to guide temporal anomalies without destroying timelines. Can we do that here? Find a solution where everyone survives?" Rebecca's laugh carried no humor. "I've been asking myself that question for 2 years. 17 different timelines. Each one, I've tried something different. And each time, the entity grows stronger. The anomaly spreads further. Reality becomes more unstable." "But this is the 18th iteration," Catherine countered. "You said each timeline is slightly different. What makes this one unique?" Rebecca fell silent, and Jackson saw understanding dawn in her expression. "You arrived with different equipment. The Chronos. That ship uses quantum drive technology we haven't perfected in my era. It doesn't just move through space. It moves through possibility space. The ship itself exists in multiple timelines simultaneously." The implication struck Jackson like physical force. "We can use it as a bridge, not to travel through time, but to merge the timelines back together. Force all the alternate histories to collapse into a single stable reality." "It would destroy the ship," Catherine said, running calculations on her handheld computer. "The quantum drive would overload, create a cascade effect that propagates backward through all the branch points we created. But it would work?" Jackson Prescott Catherine met his gaze through their helmet visors. "In theory. But someone would need to stay aboard the Chronos during the collapse. Manually control the quantum harmonics to ensure the right timeline survives. They'd be torn apart as the timelines merged. Another impossible choice. Save reality by sacrificing someone to temporal dissolution." Jackson thought about his daughter again, about the letters he'd written, about all the futures that would never exist if they failed. "I'll do it," he said firmly. "I built the propulsion systems. I can handle the controls during the collapse sequence." "No," Rebecca said, stepping forward. "It should be me. I'm the one who understood temporal mechanics first. I'm the one who left clues across centuries. This has always been my responsibility. You have a father waiting for you in the shelter, Jackson replied. Captain Foster. He's alive because we changed history. I won't make him watch his daughter die. And I won't make your daughter grow up without a father, Rebecca countered. I've lived through this moment 17 times, Jackson. I know what happens if you stay aboard the Kronos. Your sacrifice creates a stable timeline, yes. But it also creates a world where humanity never develops temporal technology, where we never reach Mars, where the future my crew came from never happens. You erase 500 years of human achievement to save the present. Then what do we do? Catherine demanded. Someone has to stay aboard that ship. Someone has to die to close this paradox. The entity had drawn closer while they argued. It circled the shelter and the anomaly like a predator, patient and implacable. Jackson could feel its presence pressing against his mind, trying to understand these strange creatures that altered probability through choice and sacrifice. Then Captain Daniel Foster's voice crackled across the radio. There's a third option. You're all thinking like the anomaly is something to be destroyed. But what if it's something to be integrated? Rebecca, you said the entity lives in probability space, that it strengthens when we create alternate timelines. What if we give it purpose instead of trying to eliminate it? Rebecca's eyes widened. Make it a guardian instead of a parasite. Anchor it to a specific function in the timeline. Exactly, her father replied. The Kronos can merge the timelines, yes. But instead of destroying the quantum bridge, we reshape it. Transform the anomaly into something stable. A permanent connection between eras that allows communication but prevents physical travel. Catherine began recalculating furiously. That could work. We'd need to reconfigure the Kronos quantum drive to emit a specific harmonic pattern, one that resonates with the entity's natural frequency. But if we get it right, we could stabilize the anomaly permanently. Create a temporal lighthouse that guides future expeditions safely. No more accidents, Jackson said, understanding the brilliance of the plan. No more ships pulled backward through time. The entity becomes part of the timeline's immune system, preventing further paradoxes. But it requires perfect synchronization, Rebecca warned. The Kronos quantum drive, the entity's probability field, and the collapse of alternate timelines all happening simultaneously. If we're off by even a microsecond, the entire structure could fail. Then we need multiple anchor points, Catherine said. Rebecca, you stay with the Pathfinder. Maintain the temporal signature from this end. Jackson, you pilot the Kronos to the anomaly center. I'll coordinate from the surface, broadcasting the harmonic pattern that binds everything together. 3 people, 3 timelines, 3 chances to get it right. Jackson said they had no time for elaborate goodbyes. No time for doubt or fear. The entity was adapting to their presence, beginning to understand that these small creatures intended to change it somehow. They could feel its growing resistance, like pressure building before a storm. The story NASA never told, the truth they buried under layers of classified documents. But the truth has a way of coming out. It begins on Mars in 1976 with a man named Jackson Reeves. He wasn't supposed to be there. Humanity wasn't supposed to be there. But he was, piloting a ship called the Kronos, flying straight into a tear in reality itself. Through the viewport, Jackson saw the anomaly bleeding impossible colors across the Martian sky. It was a wound in time, growing, threatening to unravel everything. This was a mission of no return, a desperate last-ditch effort to save the future. On the ground, 2 other figures were critical to this insane plan. Catherine, a brilliant scientist from Jackson's time, stood on the red dust, her equipment humming. She had calculated the 1 in a billion frequency needed to stabilize the chaos. Nearby was the Pathfinder, a crashed ship from 600 years in the future, and its crew of 7 survivors. Led by Rebecca and her father, Captain Foster, they held the key ancient technology that could anchor time itself. They were 3 people from 3 different eras, united by one impossible goal. Catherine's voice cut through the tension. On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark. Jackson overloaded the Kronos' quantum drives. The ship screamed, tearing itself apart, not in an explosion, but in a controlled cascade of impossible energy. This energy didn't destroy. It flowed into the anomaly, feeding it order, giving it purpose. Simultaneously, Rebecca activated the Pathfinder's temporal stabilizers. The ancient ship began to sing, its harmonies resonating across the centuries. Then, Catherine broadcast her frequency, a mathematical prayer that reality would hold. The 3 signals merged, creating an interference pattern that rewrote the laws of physics around the anomaly. The entity within the anomaly, a being of pure existence without thought or emotion, understood. It didn't fight. It embraced the change. It asterisk became asterisk the change. The tear in reality stopped growing. The violent colors softened into a gentle, rhythmic glow. Through it, Jackson could see windows into other times, the past, the future not as places to visit, but as moments to be observed. The anomaly had transformed. It wasn't a threat anymore. It was a guardian. A lighthouse at the edge of time. With its mission complete, the Kronos was dying. Jackson wrestled the collapsing ship back to the Martian surface, crash landing in a spray of red sand and failing systems. Catherine was the first to reach him, pulling him from the wreckage in a moment of pure triumph. Soon, Rebecca and her crew emerged from their shelter, tears of relief streaming down their faces. They had done it. The entity is stable, Rebecca reported. It's actively maintaining timeline integrity, preventing new paradoxes. We did it. Stranded on Mars, with no way home. You might think this was an ending, but it was a beginning. A voice from Earth crackled over the radio. Now we figure out how to bring you home. Give us 6 months, maybe a year. We'll build something better. But Jackson and Catherine saw a different path. Surrounded by future technology and 7 people who had cheated death, they saw an opportunity. We'll be here, Jackson replied. Catherine added, looking at the Pathfinder, your technology is 5 centuries ahead of ours. We could accelerate human development by decades. And so they stayed. NASA sent supplies, and a permanent research station grew around the crash site, humanity's first real city on another world. Jackson, Catherine, Rebecca, and Captain Foster worked together, combining knowledge from across centuries to build a new future. Jackson sent letters home to his daughter, telling her he was sorry he had to leave, but proud of the world she would now grow up in, a world where time was safe. Jackson Reeves died at 73, a celebrated pioneer of the Mars colony. He was buried in the red soil of the world he saved. By then, the colony numbered over 3,000 souls. His daughter visited once on the first passenger flight to Mars. They had 3 days together. It wasn't enough time. It was everything. Today, the anomaly still glows in the Martian sky, a gentle pulse of light visible from every ship that passes. A monument to impossible choices and the courage of those who make them. This is the story of how Jackson Reeves looked at destiny and said, "Not today." The story of how humanity found hope on a distant world, proving that the future belongs to those brave enough to fight for it. And for us, reaching for the stars under the watch of that silent guardian, the real adventure is just beginning. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this untold story, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into the universe's greatest secrets.